What's up, friends? Welcome to this week's Tank Talk. I'm Matt Knapp, and I'm glad that you're watching this video. So my kids and I just watched Ant-Man and the Wasp, and we agree that by far the best part about those movies is the way that one of Ant-Man's friends, Luis, tells his stories. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. So I thought it'd be funny to tell you a story just like that. This is how it goes. Back in the day, a guy and a girl from two different tribes of people got married. At their wedding reception, the groom told a riddle to some guys from the bride's town and made a bet with them that they couldn't solve it. So the guys went to the bride and asked for a favor, saying, "Hey, I know y'all just got married, but we need you to get your guy to give you the answer to this riddle and then tell us. And if you don't, we're gonna kill you and your parents. Got it?" So the bride begged her husband for the answer, and he caved. She passed the intel to her hometown bros. They solved the riddle and won the bet. The groom was unhappy about this, and he lost his temper, killed a bunch of their own people, and then left town. Maybe a slight overreaction. The bride's dad was like, "Wow, that was the worst wedding reception ever." He assumes the groom is gone for good, so he gives his daughter to be married to someone else. But after a little time passes, the groom comes back, and he asks his wife's dad, "Hey, where's my wife?" And dad's like, "Oh, I thought you were gone, so I gave her to be married to somebody else. Why don't you marry her younger sister? She's more attractive anyway." And the groom's like, no. And once again, the groom flips out. He captures a bunch of foxes and lights their tails on fire. And someone say animal cruelty? The foxes run around like their tails are on fire, because they are. And in the process, they start a wildfire that burns down a bunch of the grain vineyards and olive groves in the town. Now here's what's crazy. That story is in the Bible. It doesn't read exactly the way that I told it, but the basic plot is there. It's found in the book of Judges in the Old Testament, chapters 14 and 15. You can go ahead and you can take a look. And as a kid, I would hear this story or the stories from the Bible, and I think, what does this story have to do with my life? Teach me to never tell riddles at wedding receptions? Teach me not to set animals on fire? What is this even about? So last time we met, we started a conversation about the Bible, and we said that Jesus is the point of the Bible. And when the Bible is confusing, Jesus is kind of like putting on 3D glasses. He makes it clearer. But the truth is, Jesus doesn't show up in a lot of the things that we read. He doesn't appear in the story about the foxtails. Jesus helps us see God more clearly and helps us to see the whole story of God and humans more clearly, but what are we supposed to do with the rest of the Bible? What about when verses seem weird? If your Bible verse of the day is, "When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour." What are you supposed to do with that? Or what are you supposed to do when stories seem crazy with talking donkeys or voices coming out of fire? Yeah! Or what about commands that don't make sense? There's commands in Leviticus for people not to wear clothes that are made out of two different kinds of material. So if you're wearing a cotton polyester blend, you're in trouble, right? That just doesn't seem right at all. The point is, sometimes there's a disconnect between what we're told about the Bible and what we actually experience when we read it. We're told that the Bible can change us and help us and guide us, but when we take the time to read it ourselves, it can actually be quite confusing. And how can something so confusing change us and help us and guide us? Is there something that we're missing? Is there a different way to do this? And if there is a different way, would it help us understand verses like "don't wear clothing made out of two different fabrics"? Is there a way for verses like that to be explained? So let's get to the truth. The good news is there is a way forward, and understanding what the Bible is and what it's meant to be helps us to get the Bible in a way maybe we haven't been able to before. So let's just start with the basics. There are two halves of the Bible: the Old Testament, also known as the Hebrew Scriptures, and the New Testament. The Old Testament is the Jewish Bible, and it is pre-Jesus. The New Testament includes Jesus' life and the start of the church after Jesus died and came back to life. But within these two parts, there's a lot going on. It's a big book, and in fact, it's not a book at all. Here's what I mean. The Bible is actually 66 different documents that get put together a lot. There are poetry books and books that include laws given to the people of Israel. There are books the people of Israel wrote of their history, and wisdom books, books containing lots of advice. There are letters, lots of letters written to different people in different parts of the world, and they're all wrapped up into one big book. So to better understand this, I want you to think about the words that you have to read in your regular life. Maybe there's a poetry book that's required for your English class. Then there's a textbook maybe for your history class. Maybe you're reading a different kind of book that maybe a friend or a family member gave you for Christmas. And so far, none of these things are alike, but you're reading more than that too. There are, after all, like BuzzFeed articles that you read, and some of your friends are reading comic books. And then there are all those text messages that you send back and forth and back and forth. And then every now and then, maybe you just need like an instruction manual on how to like bake food or something. Now, imagine them all being mashed together into one big pile with a cover put around them that just says the story of everything. I mean, this is your whole life as a book. And I mean, it's kind of true, right? A big part of your life is in there, but it's also not the same, right? What if someone opened up that big giant book and part of it was originally your history textbook and was like, well, obviously the War of 1812 was really important to this person. Or what if someone read your text as if they were history or really bad poetry? And this is scary. What if they read the whole thing from front to back and assumed that it was in chronological order? Maybe they would assume that you were born during the American Revolution, grew up during the Shakespeare's time, and lived through the invention of cell phones. Now, I know this is all a bit ridiculous, but here's what I'm getting at. We do this to the Bible all the time because all these documents have one big cover on them called the Bible. And people get confused and believe that it's all the same. It's all in order, and every single piece of it is supposed to be read the same way. And that's confusing. When we read the Bible without understanding we're actually reading one of 66 different documents, we're missing one hugely important piece of scripture. We're missing context. Sometimes it's helpful for me to think of it this way. I'm not reading the Bible. I'm reading a document found in the Bible. I'm not reading a book. I'm reading a letter written to a specific group of people living in the first century. Or I'm reading a piece of wise advice that a father wrote down for his son. Or I'm reading a history book recording everything that happened. Or even I'm reading a song written to God by someone who knew him well. I could even be reading an eyewitness account of someone who actually hung out with Jesus. Context matters. It changes how we read everything. So we're going to look at two passages, and the first is from 2 Timothy, and this is what we know. It's called 2 Timothy because it was the second letter written to a guy named Timothy. It was written by the Apostle Paul, a mentor and close friend to Timothy. Timothy was a pastor of a church in a town called Ephesus, a church full of people who were struggling with all kinds of things. And this is what Paul writes. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful to me in my ministry. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. When you come, be sure to bring the coat that I left with Carpus at Troas. Also bring my books, and especially my papers. See, context makes this make sense. Paul left his jacket and wants Timothy to bring it back. Let me give you a second example. If you've been around the church for a while, then you've potentially read or heard this verse. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. That's in Philippians 4:13. With no context, this verse seems like we just stumbled across a magic genie in the Bible. I can dunk a basketball from 10 feet up through Christ who gives me strength. I can pass Spanish without studying through Christ who gives me strength. I can get multiple dates this year through Christ who gives me strength. With no context at all, this sounds like a formula for living the life of your dreams. But does it mean what we think it means? Here, context helps. This was also a letter written by the Apostle Paul, but this time to an entire church. Imagine if one of our small group leaders moved and took a job in another state and then wrote our student ministry a letter to read out loud during youth group. That's the idea of this letter. But there's more. Paul wrote to them from prison after being arrested for his faith. And in this part of the letter, Paul was thanking them for sending him some financial support, and he acknowledged their kindness. At the same time, he assured them that they didn't need to feel obligated to send more money. Paul let them know that he'll be okay whether he was hungry a little or hungry a lot. He's like, I've had a full stomach and a hungry one, and I've learned to be content either way. So this section is really about contentment. And Paul is letting them know that he has figured out how to be peaceful and content with his life, whether life is being good or life is being bad. And as Paul writes this letter, things are very difficult for him. So how can Paul find contentment even as he writes from prison with very few things going his way? For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Paul was dependent on Jesus. His close relationship with Jesus gave him the power and strength to persevere and find peace, even though things were tough. So the point isn't so much we can win this game because God is on our side. It's more like if Paul can be okay because of Jesus, then we can be okay because of Jesus. Whenever we have a lot of money or a little, whether life is going our way or it's not, we can turn our attention away from our circumstances and on to Jesus. And in turn, we can find peace that way. So you see how the verse changes as we discover context? It helps us understand it better, and it helps us know what we are supposed to do with it now. Think of it this way. Context creates clarity. Imagine if you found a note on the floor of your school. I know that people don't write notes to each other much more, but just humor me. Let's say it was a note that was exchanged between two friends in a different class, but one of them dropped it in the hallway, and you picked up the note, and the note said this: "Quit acting like a bully. I already said I'm sorry. Why can't you just drop it?" Now, would you read that note and think, am I acting like a bully to someone? What am I doing? What am I holding on to that I need to drop? No, you would understand that that note was written to someone else. You would assume that there was a conflict between two friends, and you would accept the fact that there's more to the story than you know. But we read the Bible this way a lot. We randomly pick verses or passages and have no idea why they were written or who they were written to, and we try to assume we should do exactly what they say in our own lives, even if that wasn't the point. No wonder it can be so confusing sometimes. Without background and the bigger picture behind the words in the Bible, we're just guessing at what we're supposed to learn from it. And don't miss this. If what we said last week is true, if the point of the Bible is to know God better, that means it's too important to just guess at what's going on. If we miss the backstory, or if we miss the big picture, we run the risk of missing out on understanding the God behind it all, too. So instead of being overwhelmed by what we don't understand, let's look for what we can learn in the context. The next time you come across a verse you don't understand, try asking these questions. Who wrote it, and who was it written to? Sometimes a passage doesn't make sense to us because we don't understand who the audience is. Start there. Why was it written down? 2 Timothy was written to encourage a friend in his leadership as a Christian. Philippians was written to remind a group of people that they were loved by God, and Paul, the author of the letter, and to encourage them to keep following Jesus. When you can figure out the why, it can make what was written more clearly and more easily understood. What made people think this information should be written down or saved anyways? Over 1,000 years since some of these texts were written down, decisions had to be made about which texts would be included and what wouldn't. What about what you're reading made people think that it was important enough to protect? Is it helpful to me or not? The whole Bible is important, but not all parts are equally helpful to you every moment of every day, and that's okay. A tip could be to read a passage of scripture until you bump up against something that is helpful, and then stop there. Maybe write down a few thoughts on why it's helpful and what you plan on doing with it. Oh, and just so you know, the Bible has been around for a long time, and a lot of people have tried to answer these questions already. So if you get stuck, search up some of the context online, or in a devotional book, or a study Bible, or ask a person you trust who knows a lot about Bible stuff. But if you want to just YouTube this stuff, I suggest you check out the Bible Project on YouTube. Those folks do a great job at explaining all the contexts and themes in the Bible. Check them out, it's high quality stuff. So as we wrap this up, we learned that the Bible has the ability to change our lives. But sometimes getting to the part that can be life-changing takes more than just closing your eyes and opening up a page and reading the first words that we see. That's why context creates clarity. And clarity helps us discover why what is written down was written down and how it's helpful to our lives right now. And as we discover what's helpful, we become people who are changed for the better. So, what if you and I made the decision to quit looking at the Bible with all kinds of confusion and started looking at it with courage instead? Instead of throwing our hands up and giving up because the Bible doesn't make sense, what if we approached it with curiosity and put in the effort to discover why things were written? What if we took the Bible seriously, even when things don't make sense immediately? That's all for now. Thanks for joining us on this week's Tank Talk. We'll see you next time.